Welcome to Secular Soup. Stay tuned for real talk about atheism, feminism, politics, parenting, and whatever the fuck else Amy and Amy want to talk about, because this is their show. And get ready for a whole lot of motherfucking profanity.
You want to hear a secret?
I won't tell anybody. Go ahead. If I sit next to you, I'm going to get gonorrhea. It's going to jump into me. Just two ladies hanging out.
Is it okay for me to make fun of his neck waddle if I make fun of my own neck waddle?
I'm not sure.
That's a real ethical conundrum.
Would you know if you were born a lizard person, or can you be like adopted into the...
I think you know.
We're such professionals.
We really are.
Buckle up, bitches. It's time to have some soup.
I'm Amy with a Y.
And I'm Amy with an I.
And we are just two blueberries floating in a bowl of tomato soup. And today we have two extra blueberries with us, both in my home state of Minnesota. And we are going to be talking about autism, because this month is autism. They say Autism Awareness Month. I'm told that's not what we're supposed to call it. We will get into that. But we have with us Dell Onnearth. Say hi, Dell. And Marissa McCool. So say hi, Marissa.
Hi, Marissa.
Good job. Good job.
Yeah. I follow directions. I listen to things literally. I do what you ask me to.
Perfect.
Cheesy joke right there, right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
So autism is one of those things that I think about a lot more than I guess I probably should. I don't know. But I see some traits of it in my own kids and sometimes in me. And it's one of those things where I'm always like, I wonder if maybe this is going on or not. And maybe Dell, why don't you start? How did you, I guess, suspect that maybe something was different, or that you should talk to someone about it, or kind of what led you to a diagnosis, really?
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember asking my parents about it in middle school, and they now claim that that never happened, but I have a very distinct memory of it because they dismissed it out of hand. And at the time, the thing that really was causing me a lot of trouble, which still causes me trouble to this day, but the thing that really was cueing me into it was my extreme difficulty dealing with changes of plan or changes of schedule. Mm-hmm. But growing up, I really struggled socially. And adults didn't believe me that I was struggling socially, because I got along with adults great. And I was reading at a 12th grade reading level, and I was speaking in full sentences when I was 11 months old. And so adults were like, "You're so talkative and you're so articulate. How could you have social difficulties?" But I just could not relate to other children. I couldn't do it. There was just nothing in common for me with them. And at the time, I blamed that on being an only child, or not learning social skills properly or something. Mm-hmm. And then when I was in my mid-20s, I had thought about it a fair bit over the years, and I was with a therapist who I'm still with, who I really like, and he's also autistic and queer, and I kind of brought it up offhand, and he was like, "Yes, definitely." Mm-hmm. Yes. And he ticked off a number. Yeah. He ticked off a number of things, and they weren't even necessarily the same things that I was thinking about. Mm-hmm. The things that he saw, the one I remember really distinctly that he brought up was a rigid adherence to a moral code was the one that he brought up.
Interesting.
Which I thought was interesting, because I had never even thought about that one. I just thought that was what, I don't know, being a good person was. I don't know.
That's what people do. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really think of anything along those lines, and that's kind of the whole deal. And for me, it was just a big relief in general, because I definitely felt something was terribly wrong with me. I thought that my difficulties and just the exhaustion that I feel in social situations, I can turn it on and I can really impress people, but only for sort of a short period of time. And it's, I like doing it, but it's very tiring. And I had really chalked it all up to social anxiety and something being wrong with me, that I had to expend so much effort to get along in these social situations. And finding out that I was just autistic and maybe my brain was just wired differently was just a huge relief. And I just got to take this giant chunk of effort and energy that I was expending on this stuff and just be like, it's fine, it's solved.
Yeah,
I know the answer now.
That's awesome.
Don't worry about it so much. It doesn't make interacting in social situations that much easier, but I don't triple overthink everything as much as I did before.
Yeah, that's why I drink in social situations, because then I'm not thinking about anything. I'm just like, whiskey, delicious.
See, I don't have that problem because I just want to talk
not
to
a
everybody all the
problem,
time
Amy.
about everything. It's the Minnesotan in me. Marissa, so kind of tell us about your backstory with it and how you came to that realization, I guess.
Sure. My story is remarkably similar to Dell's. So I could maybe just copy and paste theirs and be done, get that less effort. But instead, I was kind of one of those savant kids, too, that read books and way above the reading level way earlier than I should have. Like, I was reading Moby Dick in 3rd grade, to give you an idea.
Gosh.
Yeah,
But-
I was definitely reading classic novels in 3rd grade, and my teachers were like, "What is happening?" I saw it on Wishbone, okay? I was really excited.
Oh my God.
Like, mind your business.
One of the biggest things I noticed was if something didn't have a why, a reason why, then I had almost this ridiculously rebellious attitude toward it, right? But if you just told me why, I'd be fine. And that is still the case. The thing with being autistic, at least for me, is I found out about it right about the same time that I was coming out as trans. And the journeys have been remarkably similar because to both come out as trans and be public and to learn that you're autistic, you kind of have to learn how to be a person again because everything you knew is based in something that is for somebody else. So for a neurotypical cisgender person, right? And going back through that, a lot of things retrospectively made sense. My entire elementary school career, they didn't even have me be a part of the class because I was advanced. But then I hit middle school and suddenly I wasn't allowed to do whatever I wanted all the time and I just quit. Because nobody taught me how to do this shit. I don't care. And if someone tried the because I said so or because whatever, I just wouldn't do it. And that was a major problem, especially in jobs. If somebody told me to do something that they didn't have a reason for, I would just check out and I could never get it back once I did. And it wasn't until I went back to college and not only went back to college, but transferred to Penn and I was doing really well. But with foreign language, I couldn't make it work. But it wasn't like I just didn't get it. It was if I heard it, I could understand it. If I was asked to read something and do a fill in the blank about it, I could do that. But ask me to speak it or ask me to write a short essay or something, and it just didn't work. And it didn't make any sense to me because here I was at an Ivy League school with pretty much A's and everything, but not only could I not get this, but that there was that major disparity. And it was actually my professor who pointed it out to me, and they sent me to students with disabilities. And the first time I went through this exhausting test, they pretty much put me in a white room with not the doctor for 9 hours and had me try to answer memory questions. And I was nervous and kept getting really antsy and couldn't sit still, which were some of the problems I was having in class. And I'm going to give you a guess on the demographics of the guy who said this, but he accused me of having a lack of memory effort.
What?
Huh. Okay. Sure.
All right.
Can I take a guess?
Yeah, go ahead.
Was it a cis white man?
It sure the fuck was.
Possibly older?
No, actually more like my age, probably.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Getting an early start. That's good. Yeah.
Mhm.
He was an early bloomer.
Yep.
Okay.
So pretty much from there, I went back to SDS, and I'm like, look, if I don't get a foreign language exemption, I'm not going to graduate. And I have a 3.6 average, and for some reason, Penn didn't require 1 semester of foreign language. They required 4. And it's like, if I'm having trouble at 102, how the fuck am I going to get to 104?
Yeah.
And I got a grant through the SDS program to get a second opinion. And they sent me to a woman who actually did the testing and had a conversation with me first and like got to know me. And 20 minutes into the test, she's like, oh, yeah, this makes sense. And it was like, well, what gave it away? And she said, the thing that really tipped me off was how apathetic you are toward holidays and social traditions.
Really?
Oh, is
And
that
it
a
was
sign?
Yeah, I don't celebrate any holidays. I don't care about traditions. I have rituals, but they're personal.
Amy and I've
they're
had
not...
this conversation, and I am just like, whatever, and she's like so intense about it.
Oh, I'm all in. I'm all in on the
But we've already
holidays and
discussed this.
traditions.
I already know I'm on the spectrum. Like, we've already had this conversation.
Yeah.
And pretty much from there, it was just unpacking everything that I had ever known about myself and going back and being like, whoa, it was
examining
weird.
it with these new eyes. You're like, ooh, wait a second.
It was like, it was
now there's
weird
an
how
answer for this particular feeling.
Yeah, it was weird how I took everything literally and felt genuinely hurt whenever someone was playing a joke on me or playing a prank on me, because it's like I trusted you.
Yeah.
I didn't quite understand how people work in the sense of, oh, I thought we were friends. Like, just so many of those things. And it just all started really adding up. And once I started to understand my needs and the way my brain worked and pretty much everything else, it really made sense, because I was originally diagnosed as ADHD, and the crossover for those two, it's barely indistinguishable. So
Yeah.
I have heard
Yes.
that, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also a trait of autism is gender divergence. So like the crossover between those two is not unusual.
Okay, that is something that
Interesting.
I have genuinely wondered about, but was afraid to ask. It seemed to me like there was a lot of crossover between friends of mine who are transgender or gender fluid or non-binary and who also identify as having autism. Like, it seemed like there was kind of a big percentage of those, but it's one of those things where you don't really want to ask about it because you don't know if you're being, I don't know.
Well, if it helps comfort you, I got my first academic writing co-credit on exactly this topic. So
Awesome. Okay, good. So I don't feel bad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I find especially like in the non-binary community, the percentage of the non-binary community that's autistic is got to be just gigantic from my
Yeah, that's
like
just fascinating.
my very unscientific.
Brains are so interesting.
Super weird.
Well, and the thing you said about getting really angry if somebody played a joke on you or did something like that, I see that a lot in my younger son. Imagine living in a house with me and not appreciating sarcasm. It's got to be torture, I can imagine. And I notice him just being like, he just gets genuinely hurt if he thinks he's being teased, because even when we don't think we're teasing him, it's something I feel so bad about, because the rest of us are just being sarcastic dicks all the time.
I mean, reading sarcasm is something I definitely learned to do. So I don't think it's universal that we can't, quote unquote, understand it. It just doesn't come naturally.
Feel right, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. And for me, a lot of that discomfort is around just triple overthinking everything because of an insecurity. You can feel that you're not getting all the information. You know what I mean? Like, you can feel that you're missing something, and that just feels really scary. Yeah, a level of insecurity, and I don't mean insecurity as in like lack of self-confidence. I mean insecurity as in I don't know if I feel safe because I don't understand everything that's happening here, and when I can't understand everything that's happening here and I think something's happening that I can't see, that makes you nervous.
I have a question for y'all.
Yeah.
So one thing I've noticed, because I'm just, in the past like 4 years, I've started to notice things in myself because of my children. See things in my children, and they were diagnosed. I was like, holy shit, they got it from somewhere. And I started looking, at first I blamed my ex, but then I was like, nope, no. So what I've noticed is I can be like really distant and sarcastic and kind of like borderline mean in my jokes. But if someone does it back to me, I'm like, whoa, that's too far. Then I take it personally, but I can do it all day. Because I know I'm joking.
Right.
So, but if anyone gives me basically a taste of my own medicine, essentially, I'm like, oh wow, ouch. That doesn't make me a better person though, because I'm not going to grow and change and learn because I'm too old for that shit.
My take on it is, I think especially autistic people that don't necessarily know they're autistic, a lot of it is because we do a lot of mimicry, and like we do a lot of leaning really heavily into a certain communication style because we've learned that it's working okay. And so rather than naturally freewheeling it, we kind of pick something and we just lean in really hard and to patterns that we're recognizing in people around us to kind of, it's not so natural. It's like you pick something and then you just practice it and then that's what you do and that's your thing, you know?
Yeah, it's like trying to decode constantly. It's everybody around us is just constantly speaking this language that we can kind of pick up on, but we don't quite understand. And we are just constantly trying to decode that. And when we're wrong, especially when we're emulating what we're seeing, or when somebody is hurt by it, we're both upset that we upset somebody, but we're also upset that, like, oh, I thought I was in on this joke. Apparently I'm not. Or I thought I understood what was happening, but clearly I don't.
Or you assume you're the brunt of it. I do. I always do. I'm like, I assume that everyone's laughing at me.
Oh, constantly.
And even though I'm the one that told the joke, I'm like, oh crap, it's too far. Now I'm the brunt of the joke. Like, it's it happens constantly. Like, even today, and also with whether or not people like me or care about me, constantly. We need reassurance constantly. It's also anxiety. It's super fun.
Yeah. Oh, the anxiety train, man. Everybody. So another thing I wanted to ask about was the whole Autism Awareness Month thing, because Dell had mentioned there was a bunch of baggage behind calling it that.
What should we call it?
Yeah. What's the proper phrasing here?
Autistic acceptance is, I think, the more general term I hear. And so the thing is, there's a charity called Autism Speaks, and they're kind of the most common people pushing the Autism Awareness Month narrative. And
aren't they garbage?
Yeah, the problem is Autism Speaks
basically garbage people.
They are almost all the parents, primarily mothers of autistic children. And one of the things that they heavily advocate for is a cure to the suffering that is autism.
Oh my God.
And that cure is electroshock.
And yes, a ton of problematic history around just all of that is terrible. So anyway, their symbol is the puzzle piece. The color is blue, and autism awareness is their big cash grab. And so all three of those things are considered not cool.
Well, and I feel like who's not aware of autism at this point? Like, we're all pretty aware of it. We don't know, even if we don't know anything about it, we're pretty aware it exists.
About Jesus? You're like, yes. Everybody has literally heard about Jesus.
Yeah. Did you hear this song by McCool yet? Yes, everybody's heard it except for me.
Amy finally heard it. So yes, everybody's heard it.
So what are some of the more common traits? Like, you both mentioned several things that you experience, but what are some of the other maybe common traits that either you don't experience but you know about, or things that, I don't know, maybe one thing I'm curious about is the whole concept of stims, on having these actions that you do for stimulation. Who wants to talk about that a little bit? Marissa, jump on in there.
Yeah, sure. Stimming is often a physical action that's done on repeat, and sometimes it's just so we can focus. Sometimes it's if we're getting nervous or really anxious, and it varies person to person, obviously, but one of mine, especially if I'm in a place of standing where we're supposed to be moving, but we're not. So say we're in line at the zoo and people aren't moving and there's a lot of people just standing around. If that happens for too long, I will start to shift my weight really fast and slap my thigh or something like that, like some kind of rhythm tapping. And it's noticeable enough that the people who know me know when it's happening and can usually guide me out of a situation like that. But it has its various uses, its various tics, for lack of a better word. And I've often noticed it's usually related to some kind of anxiety, or it's something someone needs to do in order to focus on something else. And I think part of that is a lot of autistic people that I've met personally and myself, we need to be doing more than one thing at once.
Yeah.
If we just sit and focus on one thing too much, or if we have to sit still and try to do one thing, we will get really nervous and antsy and start needing to move around. And we find that's what fidget spinners were for. That was originally what they were for, was so we could have something in our hands to just mindlessly do whatever so that we could focus on what we're doing, and then fucking people ruined it.
Yeah, of course. Right away. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, I skin pick. Which is like the worst. I mean, maybe not the worst, but I find it extremely difficult. And I play with my hair a lot. I mean, that's kind of my main one.
Oh my gosh,
And I get it. Your hair's fantastic.
You do have really, really great hair.
You both have great hair. I love both of your hair.
As you're both talking, I'm sitting here just picturing everything in my life and my children. And my older son does a thing where he's constantly picking at his cuticles. And I'm just like, doesn't that fucking hurt? He's like, nope. And he does it constantly.
But it feels.
He loves
That's
it.
the thing is, it hurts, but it doesn't really hurt. It's a feeling.
Well,
it's
and
not the hurting, it's a sensation.
He's told me he'll pick at anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I pulled my hair out by the chunks. My parents took me to the first therapist at 18 months because I would pull my hair out by giant chunks by the root. Ouch. I was bald until I was like 5.
Oh my god.
Because every time I get hair, I would pull it out by the root. And my parents couldn't figure out what was wrong. And the therapist asked me to describe how my parents touched me. Like, that's the route they took.
Oh, no.
I get it, but that wasn't the problem. The problem was my brain was just different. Like, I just handling the stress of everything and living with my mother full time. That was probably the main constant source of my stress. Yeah. So
I wonder, and I know I've mentioned this to Dell before, but I guess as a parent, I did not realize that trying to pursue a diagnosis of autism is actually a lot more complicated than I originally was led to believe. Like, both of my kids have been diagnosed with anxiety.
Like, everybody's autistic.
Well, no, I thought it was like I was already taking my children to therapy for anxiety, and so I thought they're seeing a therapist, and that's something that a therapist would screen for, right? Like, they would screen for it, or no. None of them. I don't know.
Dell and Marissa can correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it the trifecta too? It's if your child has, it's a lot of times it's autism, OCD, and Tourette's. It's the trifecta that is it's more common that Tourette's is especially seen in children that already have OCD and autism.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it, but
because my son was diagnosed with all three, so I was like, they told me it was a trifecta. I was like, is that sure? Is that like common? I don't know.
Yeah, I know my older son for sure, they diagnosed him also with OCD. They said OCD tendencies, which I guess isn't a straight up diagnosis.
It means they can't diagnose him yet.
Exactly. But yeah, when I've asked therapists, they're like, oh yeah, no, you have to, because we're in rural Minnesota, there's nobody here that does it. You have to go to some other therapist in another place. And I'm just thinking, really? Like, why is it that hard to get diagnosed, and why is it something that I guess takes so much time? And I don't know. It sounds like, Marissa, you got like an actual,
that's awesome,
like they did, what's the word I'm looking for?
Screening, diagnosing,
No, I had to fight for it. Not only did I have to fight for it, but I had to fight for it again when some white guy doctor was wrong. And even then, it took so much just to get that specifically so I wouldn't have to take foreign language. Yeah. And keep in mind, this is at an Ivy League school that had an SDS that was well-funded enough that I was able to get a $600 grant in order to get that second opinion. So, like, I know that I'm speaking from a place of privilege, despite the fact that I was one of the token poor kids that got into that school. So, it's heavily gatekept, not only from a financial standpoint, not only from a medical standpoint, but also until maybe the last couple years, autism was presumed to be a cisgender white boy thing. And when it was anyone else, it was presumed to be problematic behavior or rebelliousness, or because they only understood autism in the sense of what it makes cisgender boys do. And female autism...
Isn't that when they started just diagnosing everybody with Ritalin, like giving them Ritalin? Not Ritalin. Ritalin. Ritalin is different.
That was the whole ADHD.
That's thing, the ADHD thing, but it's like an ADHD and gifted children, it's probably on the spectrum. You know, a lot of those kids were misdiagnosed.
Yeah, the traits overlapping are between ADHD and autism are just huge.
Right, you walk in the gifted class and it's like everybody's on the spectrum. Let's be real.
Well, and I guess I wonder, like, what is involved in diagnosing someone with autism? Like, I know if you get a diagnosis of anxiety or depression or anything like that.
To their doctor, was that just me?
I mean, basically, you sit with your psychiatrist or therapist and you talk them through what's going on, and they can kind of make a diagnosis. But it seems to me like autism is more. I can't seem to figure out what it is they actually do to diagnose it.
It's not like a symptom. Like if you have swollen lymph nodes, you have this. If you have this, then you have this.
But it should be a collection of traits, right? I mean,
but it's such a broad spectrum that it's not.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Is there's no one. This is what an autistic person looks like. There's no one like. Here's your average autistic person. Like, no, it's not. It's not.
And one of the other problems is like a lot of times a diagnosis might be denied if the person, I left it with my therapist. Like my therapist was like, yeah, absolutely. Do you want to pursue official diagnosis? And I was like, I don't see any advantage in that right now. So I just haven't looked into it because I don't have any reason to right now. Like my therapist is obviously an expert. That's fine with me for now. I mean, I might pursue it in the future. I'm not sure, but they might deny you just based on like, you made eye contact with me and shook my hand when you came into the room.
Therefore, not autistic.
Right. Yeah. And what they don't understand is, especially my mother was a journalist. And so I learned how to communicate by basically pretending to be her. And so like, I can fake it really well for like an hour or two. You know what I mean? Like I put on a really good show, but it's a lot of fucking work. And like it's a show that's really hard for me. And that's the other reason that high functioning and low functioning labels are absolutely inappropriate, is because
everybody has their days too.
Yeah, they're judging you by how inconvenient you are to a neurotypical person when they happen to be seeing you, and not actually on any like appropriate collection of traits, you know?
Right, like you go to a party. Like I went to a party this weekend. I was super social and I talked to everybody. Today, I felt like garbage all day because I couldn't and I had an eye doctor appointment and I had a bunch of other things to do. And I was just in this funk all day because I spent the whole weekend socializing. Like, I can't.
Well, and I think one of the most common things you hear about autism, at least as a parent, is the idea of your child not being able to show any affection towards you, or you not being able to hug them. And as a parent, that is scary. I mean, it's not something I experienced with my kids. My kids were both very cuddly and want hugs all the time and they're like that. But like, I also feel like that would be horrible to be a parent and your child just you can't have that, I don't know, that bond with them, I guess.
My neighbor fix their deck because they have a home inspection and they needed to close by Wednesday or someone went bankrupt. It was a whole thing. And they had to get railings on their deck. So I was helping them yesterday, and their son is diagnosed with autism. And yep, he made me pay in hugs to get one screw from him every time.
Oh my God.
Also to pass through any doorway.
I mean, fair. Yeah. Totally
and no one had trouble diagnosing him. So just another thing that just is somewhere on the spectrum. I'm guessing a lot of people who have a problem with physical contact, it's the sensory overload thing.
It depends on who you're hugging too and the situation.
It depends on if someone's making
like if someone comes up to me and says, give me a hug, I'm like, pass. But with my partner, all I want is touch. Like I want to be like right up against them. Practically, if I could rip them open and climb inside, I probably would, because I need like them to be enveloped. Like
I hate hugging. I think it's the worst.
See?
But like when my kids were babies, they were very interactive with me, and just you could constantly interact with them without any problems. And I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions about autism, obviously, because of course there are. This is America and we're the worst.
Well, I think sensory overload is like the biggest thing that non-autistic people have a hard time understanding. Even like me, if I'm hanging out with another autistic person, I can't see, unless you know them and like Marissa was saying, know their particular things, like their particular cues, you kind of don't really realize that from the outside that the sensory overload is happening. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, do not touch me. I need to leave the room. And you just like shut down. Because there's just the things that sort of grate on you they're different even from autistic person to autistic person. And so like for some people, that type of physical touch is going to throw them over the edge if they're not in an environment that feels safe already. They're in a public place or there's harsh lighting or a lot of background noise.
Or
like then
loud,
being touched
loud
is like
talking.
too much.
Like for me, it's yelling. Like if anyone raises their voice to me slightly, even just slightly, I shut down immediately. And that's from my childhood, obviously.
Oh, Marissa, you were going to say something. Go ahead.
I think with touch especially, a lot of it has to do with us setting the boundaries and us deciding we want it. I think part of why, and this is purely anecdotal based on my own experience, but I think a lot of it is determined by those of us who were forced to give hugs and kisses and with people we didn't want to.
Yeah.
But when it's mom or when it's our partner, we
It's safe.
decide
It's
that.
the safe.
Yeah.
I had
we
to
decide.
hug my mom's great grandma, and I still remember to this day, I was 4 years old. She had long chin hairs, and it freaked me out because she was like over 100, and we went to visit her in the nursing home, and I was really scared, and I said, I don't want to, and she forced me. And I'm still like traumatized by that forced physical interaction.
Yeah.
Well, and that sounds like it could
Not
have
okay.
been a really overwhelming environment because I just know nursing homes.
Well, it's a lot.
there's
The smell really
the
drove
medical
into me.
smells. The medical smells, and it's a new place. Like to this day, as a grown adult, if I go to a place I've never been before, or
Hospital.
if I meet a person I've never met before, I'm shaking.
Yeah.
There's no way
That's
around
when I
it.
put on bright red lipstick, because that's me. That's how I roll. And I do my hair real cute, and I wear something really low cut because I'm like, no one's even going to look at my face. And then I feel okay.
Yeah, no, that's when I launch in and just talk about the weather.
Yeah, Marissa, I
You-
was
you gotta have
shaking at
that.
your wedding because I'd never actually met you in person.
Aw.
I was so nervous. I was like shaking because I was like, I've never met her. I know her and I love her. So, but I was so nervous the whole time. I was so nervous. And then I was crying too because it was beautiful.
Yeah,
Aw,
it was.
well. Sensory overload, though, isn't just being touched or social situations like that.
Maybe it's sound.
Yeah.
Mine is
not-
sound.
Not just sound, but complexity of sound. So
For
like
me,
the,
it's a crinkle, like plastic crinkle sound.
the more sensory input there is and the more different kinds there are, it's, at least for me, very difficult to focus. So if I'm talking to Amy at Original Pancake House the first time we met, if I can hear her clearly and there's not a bunch of other people loudly talking, I'm fine.
Right. But it
if
was
the
loud
table-
in there.
Exactly. If the table next to us has a lot of people who don't know what indoor voice means, it all turns to white noise. And I have to focus extra hard on what Amy is saying.
Right.
Or for a lot
Just
of us,
wait, she'll
it's-
repeat herself. It'll circle back
Yeah, it's
around.
fine. We'll talk about the weather. Yeah.
for a lot of us, it's texture. And like in
yes.
foods, there are some
Oh,
foods
yeah.
I eat purely because of the texture and how it feels. Like there's a feeling in my teeth because of a certain texture.
It's
Or-
radishes for me, FYI. It's got the crunch and the spice.
I'll bring you some.
Or overwhelming
I
smells.
always have
or
radishes in my house.
fluorescent lights, especially, or ones that make a noise. There's this low hum to it.
Oh, yeah.
And I worked in a hotel that had
Those
that. And
office buildings.
I had a headache
Yeah.
every single night, literally, because of it.
Oh my God, just everything. How are my kids not diagnosed yet? Oh my God.
And to me, Amy, what you've said about anxiety is
Yeah.
basically sensory overload presents like anxiety.
Oh,
is
yeah.
my
And the
opinion.
problem
Like,
is,
it looks
as
like horrible anxiety.
women, we are so good at masking because we're trained to mask from an early age. No one actually knows how we're feeling or if we're really overwhelmed because we're very good at just presenting the happy face.
Well, yeah, I know when my older son was still in school, it was gym class was a huge issue.
Oh, God.
Gym class
Gym class
and lunch.
is a fucking nightmare.
Yeah.
It was,
And
you know what I used to
Gym class
do?
and lunch,
I would
absolutely.
climb to the top of the rope and just stay there.
That's a good idea.
You remember the rope? So yeah, I would just climb all the way to the top. Who's gonna get me? Who's gonna come after me?
Yeah, I actually remember just one of his teachers saying, basically told the school, I need to opt him out of gym class. And he would go sometimes, but I'm like, if he feels like it's too much, do not make him go.
See, I was just told I was lazy. So.
Of course you were. I mean, and that's one of the, do you think the stigma and the ideas about it do you think we're finally getting somewhere? Like,
I hope so.
Or is
some
it
people.
with some people? Or do you think it's still just nobody knows what in the hell they're talking
Well, it's like
about?
when people are so overwhelmed or so depressed that they can't do their dishes or something. That doesn't mean they don't want to. It's that executive function disorder. You can't blame them or judge them based on that particular factor.
Yeah.
Yeah, as an adult, I struggle with executive function a lot, which I didn't growing up. And I think that my life, I was the kind of overachiever child who got straight A's and everything. And I was in so many activities that
then you get tired.
They literally overlapped with each other.
Yeah, like, you get worn out. Like, I did that too. And then you get worn out. And then you reach a certain point and you're just done. Like, you've already done it.
Yeah.
And so you check out.
My life was so structured up until I finished college, basically. Even in college, I was taking 21 credits at a time. I got 2 degrees in 3.5 years, and I worked 25 hours a week, and I drove to see my boyfriend, who was 6 hours away, and I was in a sorority, and I did, like, my schedule has always been
I'm exhausted just listening to you.
Okay, I did, as a 4-H'er, I took, like, 7 cows to the county fair, and I did 17 non-livestock projects every summer.
Oh, my God.
I packed my schedule with, like, my parents' enablement, or they weren't forcing me, but so to me it feels like this executive function thing just hit me like a truck as an adult. But I think that I just scheduled the shit out of my life, and that also meant that all of those impositions were coming from somewhere else, right? And so now that I'm like a adult with a job and another job, it's like having to juggle it all myself and get myself to do things on my own self-imposed deadlines is virtually impossible.
So can you explain a little bit what executive function means? Just when you talk about that, what that is.
It's basically the ability to prioritize what you need to do and then start it.
And then actually do it.
Generally speaking, the problem is with starting it. And once you've started the task, you can finish it. But like, you get up in the morning, and unless you've created a ritual for yourself, and this is my problem is, and I don't know, Marissa might have a different take, but one of the hallmarks of autism is supposed to be these really ingrained schedules and rituals. And I have forced myself to never make them because I react so poorly if they get fucked up. Like, I'm so mean. Like, I'm so mean if they get fucked up. And so
that's how I am too. If anything changes on me, I get really upset and put out.
I lose my mind. My dentist or my eye doctor canceled on me the other day, and I cried for 20 minutes. And like, the problem is if my schedule is going to be that I wake up at this moment and I brush my teeth and I do this and I do that, and my husband tries to converse with me in that time period, I will literally bite his head off. And then I won't have a husband anymore. So I have
you're about to die.
I've responded to that tendency by forcing myself to never have a schedule and to never have a routine so that I can never be upset that it gets disrupted. But that has cost me. Smart. But it's cost me so much.
See, I'm so structured that it's
I just wander around aimlessly, accomplishing nothing because I'm so afraid of
structure.
No,
you do not accomplish nothing. You're amazing and super accomplished. So shut up there.
Yeah, you're very accomplished.
You're amazing. Right? Yeah, I did. So this week we have a 5-year-old with us, and his flight information changed from tomorrow to Thursday, and I lost my shit for half the day. I was like so mad because not only do we have an extra child for extended a period of time, but also things changed. I have to go to the airport now, and I have to do this, I have to do that, and yeah, I lost my shit for half the day. I was like,
I am so
angrily clicking on my computer, like doing work, like angrily clacking, and me like bad texting my friends, like I'm in a funk and I'm pissed off, and
I wing it through life like you can't even believe. It drives everyone crazy.
If I wing it, I would probably just like lose my shit.
No, I'm just like, I don't. What do we want? I'll change my mind 600 times, and
that sounds more like ADHD to me.
Probably.
You know, like that sounds like a typical.
Yeah,
sort of.
I can't. Whereas my husband and my kids, to a certain extent, but really my husband is just like, we are going to leave at this time. We need to leave at this time. Why aren't we leaving yet? Why are we still like? We have a schedule to keep. Why aren't we keeping the schedule? Whereas I'm more like, but do we have to though? Really? I mean, can't we just like it's fine. We'll just wait 10 minutes, and I have this other thing I need to do, and nobody will. Yeah, that's just
You know what I think is really interesting is I feel like I know, Amy, with why you had said that you heard my metaphor of finding out I was autistic was like finding out that I was red-green colorblind, and people had been telling me that if I just tried harder, I would be able to tell red and green apart. Yes. And so it was this relief of finding out that it wasn't because I was being lazy and failing. It was because I literally couldn't tell the difference between red and green. Yeah. But I also feel like I can see ultraviolet, and I have no words in the English language to describe it to other people. I don't mean that I can literally see ultraviolet, but what Amy and I was describing about the schedule changes and then you lose your mind. The world feels wrong now. And like,
I get super upset, like I'm shaking. Like I'm so upset I'm shaking. But there's no reason, because all it was a text saying, hey guys, my flight's coming in on Thursday instead of Tuesday. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I'm so mad.
I'm so mad. There's no words. I feel like there is a lot of sensations in the autistic mind that we do not have good words for or descriptions for.
Yeah, I sent text to my partners and I was like, hey, just tell me that you love me and let me vent for a minute and just tell me you love me and everything's going to be okay. Because that's what I need right now, because this is not okay. Like, I am not okay.
I don't know, Marissa, do you have any other, I feel like there should be a word for that emotion. You know what I mean? Do you have any other ones you can think of?
I just call it, craptastic funktown, but that's not the word.
That there should be a word for? I don't know. There should be a word when you have whatever your thing is and it's organized in the right way. Well, whatever that way is.
There's been a bunch of different things that have come to mind here. One specifically is I remember working in retail, and I was really good at organizing things. I worked in a suit store, and if I was organizing ties, they would all be with patterns, light to dark, by color, and in a very specific spot.
That sounds so satisfying.
Yeah.
But if someone messed one of them up, I would have a mental fucking breakdown.
Oh my gosh.
But worse, if someone stopped me before I was done, I got in trouble with bosses so much for that because, a customer came in, but I'm not done with this. It creates this unbearable tension and voice in the mind because we have to spend so much energy just to focus on what we're doing that we can't focus on anything or hyper focus. And if we get pulled out of hyper focus, we get really pissed off. Like it's such a weird place to be. And I know what Dell is saying about wishing there were words for certain things. And I had the perfect way to explain that. And it was how I got diagnosed in the first place, was I heard German. I understood what German was. I understood what they were saying. And then I couldn't say it back. So I really understand what you're saying there, because my autism was pretty much discovered because I could hear something and understand it, but not produce it in the way that people wanted it to. And I bring that back to, once again, having to learn how to be a person again and understanding what happens when we put that mask on and understanding that, we speak in code often enough to try to either get what we need or not be noticed in certain ways. Or when we're around other autistic people, oh my God, I can info dump about my special interest and you won't think I'm annoying. It's a bunch of codes. But when it's with neurotypical people, especially people we don't know very well, we're often playing a character and pushing specific buttons to give them what they want. Because there are an awful lot of things that we're just like, I don't care about this and I don't understand why you want it. It seems ingenuine. A great example to me is if, the big thing right now where it's like, people are pissed off if you say no problem instead of you're welcome. And
what? Oh, yeah.
There's people who have a big problem, like, no problem. No, you're supposed to say you're welcome. And my inner monologue has always been, if you are saying or doing a thing just to get the specific word code response back, are you really doing it for the right reasons? Like
You're doing it for yourself.
Right, right. And those are the things, especially for me, where I would get so annoyed that I would quit things. That's why I've never been good with scheduled jobs or jobs where I'm not allowed to say what I mean, because it hurts. It physically hurts to not say what I am feeling, and it hurts to have to speak that code for too long. Like some of y'all have been to conventions with me, and you've seen me go up on stage and I'm a performer, but then for a half hour afterwards,
you have that
I
drop.
have to be I have to be
I do
in
too.
low sensory. I have to not have a lot of sound input coming in. And unless it's someone I trust, they better not come talk to me because I'm fried from just putting that out.
After some episodes, I'm like, I feel it for 2 days. It depends.
Yeah, it's a full-on hangover. Like, it's a full, it's a full hangover.
Especially when we did the abuse episode or the rape episode. That one affected me a couple days at least. I was sick to my stomach for a couple days.
But so like some people ask, how can you edit 13 podcasts in a week? And it's like, because I decided I wanted to. I do this. This is my job. I can sit down and go, okay, it's 6 o'clock. I'm going to edit this podcast that I produce.
Nobody's
and I'm going
telling
to
me to do it.
Exactly. It's my own agency. But if someone if like a boss told me, you need to do this, my first instinct would be, go fuck yourself. And because it's very difficult for at least autistic people like me to lie or to say you like something and when you don't, or deal with a customer that you really hate, but you have to put on that smile. It's very difficult to function in that environment for very long.
Well, I think I've noticed I've talked a ton on the podcast about schooling and unschooling and education and all that shit, but I feel like a lot of problems that especially my older son was having in school were the issue of things that are being taught that are arbitrary, that he would just be like, why the fuck do I need to know this? And I couldn't answer him with a good answer. I don't know, because you do. Yeah. But why? I'm like, because then you get to the next step. But why do I need that step? Because then you get to the next step. But why do I need that?
That was
and
one
you
of the
start
first things
thinking
I
to
said,
yourselves,
right?
like,
I need a why.
Yeah, I can't explain. If I can't explain to him why he needs to do something, then that's fair. I'm not going to make him do it because there really isn't a reason then.
I didn't
but if
pass
he's in
a
charge
single
of what
year
he's
of high
doing,
school. Okay? I did not pass a year of high school, but I went back to community college at 26 and did well enough to get into Penn. So
well,
it's
at that point, you were doing something that you wanted to do, and you knew that there was a reason for it. And it wasn't just, I feel like a lot of public school is just making kids learn things that at some point along the way, we've all decided they need to know. But we can't, if we sit down and really look at it, we think, how did we get here? And why is this the thing they must know?
Right.
And especially when we're living in a world that's so different than how we grew up, when our kids have access to immediate information at their fingertips.
And for those of us who were in those gifted programs and were treated as the gifted students when we were young, we would get punished. Like, I don't know if this is a familiar experience, but like they would say, read chapters 1 to 3, and I would read the book because
I would too.
Yeah, and
I did that in college too. I would do the entire syllabus, and then I would just coast all 16 weeks.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, what are you doing this whole semester? I'm like, I already did everything.
Yeah. But that's punished in elementary school, and it's punished in high school. It's like, well, you need to do the assignment.
Because you're not moving at the pace of the class.
Exactly. And it's like, oh, so doing more than you're supposed to or doing something because you like it is punished. Okay, well, I'm not going to fucking do anything.
So you learn to slow yourself down and be actually lazy in your own brain.
Yeah,
and then just read the
book or
one or two chapters every single day. Because I read a book in 2 days. Like, I'm done.
Same.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there's
like, I can hardly pick up a book without just.
Oh, yeah. That's why I do audiobooks now, because I listen to them while I'm working. And once I start a book, my gentleman caller knows that I'm not going to talk to him, like, ever for 2 days. Because I'm just going to be in my book.
I do that with puzzles. Oh my God. I won't let myself do them anymore because you won't hear from me for 3 days until I've got that fucking puzzle done. But
Dell,
so
I just read a
therapeutic.
good one. If you like sci-fi and horror books,
So one of the things I'm curious about is, in your opinion, do you think having that diagnosis, or even just being public about that diagnosis, has been more good than bad for you overall? What is your feeling about, I guess, where the stigma's at right now, and if that diagnosis has made your life better or worse in some ways? Or do you wish that you had been diagnosed much earlier in life? Kind of what are your thoughts on that, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this when I was thinking about the neurodiversity panel later this month, because similarly, all four of us on the panel, ADHD and autistic, did not know until we were adults, all AFAB people. And so our stories were very similar. My life would have been so different that I don't even know if I can't even imagine how different it would have been. So I don't really know. I mean, I am 100% grateful to have known. It has been the best thing ever to know. My parents don't believe me.
Oh, wow.
That's fun. I talk about it and they don't tell me they don't believe me, but they've told other people they don't believe me. So they're very skeptical because they just cannot wrap their hands around the idea that their perfect little girl isn't what they thought. They just can't wrap their minds around. They see it as a deficit or as something they missed. And they're just but you were the perfect child. You got straight A's. You never got in trouble. I mean, I certainly talked back and stuff like that, but I was the perfect little goody two-shoes. So,
I think a lot of that, too, is just older generations, or my parents' generation, thinking they have this idea that we are overdiagnosing everything.
Right.
And that they see that as a bad thing, and they kind of roll their eyes. Even when my kids were just diagnosed with anxiety, it's kind of okay, again, maybe have you thought that maybe he's just being stubborn and doesn't want to do his schoolwork? Or they kind of have that idea, and it's, I don't know. I feel like I get that eye roll from my mom a little bit whenever I talk about depression, or she's gotten that a little more, but when I talk about the kids and their anxiety and what they can or can't do, and it's, I don't know, I just feel like parents at least parents of my parents' generation, are having a hard time understanding why so many things are getting diagnosed. And I think
that stuff was beaten out of them at that age.
Exactly. Well, and because, if you didn't conform when they were kids, you just got bullied or beaten, or you killed yourself. I'm sorry, but that was something that people did because nobody understood them or helped them. They thought there was something wrong with them. Now that we're actually seeing some of these things for what they are and diagnosing them, that's not a bad thing. But
there was a recent conversation on Facebook about how literally in our grandparents' generation, they beat left-handedness out of people.
Yeah.
My grandma had the left-handedness beat out of her in Catholic school, and she wrote with her right hand, but she said she could never play piano because her hands were so beat up from getting hit. And
my mom's
what do you know?
lefty.
Left-handedness went from 5% or less of the population to 12% of the population in one generation when we stopped beating people for it.
Well, my mom's she's a lefty, and she didn't get beaten for it, but she did have, when she was in school, they still did the tie your right hand or left hand behind your back thing and trying to make you write with your right hand, and she still just talks about how horrible that was. And you think about it and what a ridiculous thing to fight a kid on, which hand they write with. I mean, it's...
Think about that. And then think about the fact that if I had to follow the way that my high school taught education, I would still be a high school dropout, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But when it went from, you have to sit in this class and speak these specific codes and pass this specific test, to, hey, I figured out how I learn things. And it's different from most people, but with this situation, with this environment, and with this particular thought process, I aced every test. So it's that, especially out of the 1950s, there was so much, there's one way to do things. You are one kind of person. You only love one kind of person. Everything is highly, highly structured and ritualized. And it's the same thing with gay people. It's the same thing with trans people. It's all across the board where people are like, oh, where did all these queer people come from? I don't know. Maybe a lot of trans people were killed in the Holocaust. maybe
or they
a lot
were
of
hiding before. They were afraid of you. You as in you fucking asshole racist.
Yeah,
pieces
where
of
were the
shit
Gen
out
X
there.
or trans and queer people? I don't know. It's almost like there was a pandemic that happened that was ignored. Weird.
Yep. Yeah, oh God.
So overall, to just finish up sort of what I was trying to answer your question was,
Yes,
I
please.
have experienced nothing but positivity from finding out about myself. I mean, there's been a few little moments where I kind of realized maybe you need to do things X way, even though you wish you didn't have to, but that's just how it's going to be. But for the most part, it's been 95% positive. And I've never experienced anything negative from being open about it yet, but it's not like I've been just putting a sign on my forehead for the last 3 years either. So
yeah, it's the type of thing that you wouldn't know necessarily unless you disclose that information. So
I'm interested in Marissa's answer as far as is it 100% positive?
Me too. Yes.
Not 100%, definitely not. But having that why, both for being trans and for being autistic, has been life-changing for me. Because going back and being, oh, you weren't just weird or annoying or combative or not living up to your potential. There was a reason for this. There was a reason that you related to certain people. There was a reason that when you structured things a certain way, you functioned better. Like, it's rebuilding everything from that perspective and knowing what I needed and knowing how I functioned best and knowing what special interests I should dive into, what cycle I'm in on focusing on a specific thing. All of these things have been extremely beneficial for me to the point that I can work on 10 different podcasts or that I can go see certain kinds of birds at a place every day and it never gets old to me. However, there are a lot of people who think they know what autism is and they speak down to you like a fucking child about it, or they treat you like a burden. Or I've posted some of the people who have treated me like shit for it. I've posted screenshots of that, even from fellow trans people. There was someone who was posting on my wall playing like a role-playing game or something, and then I played back and they were like, wow, that was weird. God, for an autistic person, you sure are annoying. It must be exhausting to deal with you all the time. And it's like, where the fuck did this come from? I thought we were playing a game. Like, that happens all the fucking time. And then, of course, you have a certain segment of the population that conflates autism with the R word and refers to it specifically that way. So, but overall, my mother's first reaction was similar to Dell's. It was, well, we had you tested for that when you were younger. Oh, you mean when I was 7 in deep red Pennsylvania in 1993? You think maybe they've learned something about it since then? So overall, having a why, knowing what I need in order to maximize what it is I want to do, to have the best relationship with my partner, to everything, just being able to go, birds are my special interest. That's why I post 1,300 pictures. Like, it's going from that instead of being like, oh God, it's so annoying. Why are you hyper-focused on something for 3 months in a cycle and then forget about it? Now I know why. And knowing that why, same as being trans, it all makes sense. And I can put it in a neat little spot in my bookshelf and refer to it when necessary.
Yeah, that makes
and I can just
sense.
stop beating myself up about it. Like,
it's
just huge.
That's awesome. Well, so it's been about an hour. I don't know if there's anything either one of you want to... Anything we've left out that you want to talk about? Or?
I do want to touch on one last thing, and I'm trying to figure out how to bring this up tactfully in my panel at my workplace. But generally speaking, since I was diagnosed as an adult, I don't have any experience with this. But something called ABA is a very, very common treatment for autism, and it's a type of behavioral therapy. It stands for Applied Behavioral Analysis.
Oh, I did want to hear about this, actually.
The adult autistic community considers it to be straight up abuse based on abusive principles. 30 years ago or less, it involved literal abuse, like electric shocks and things like that. And they try really hard to say they're a newer, kinder version of ABA, but the principle is still, generally speaking, putting your kid in up to 20 to 40 hours a week of this therapy in which they withhold. They've switched from negative reinforcement to withholding positive reinforcement and trying to force kids to stop acting autistic. So the general principle is still pretty universally acknowledged among adult autistic people to be abusive. And that is something that's really, really hard for parents of autistic kids to hear, because a lot of times they've spent a lot of money on it.
Mm-hmm.
And the general alternative...
And they've probably been told that's what they're supposed to do.
And they're often told that their kids, like, oh, they're behaving so much better. And the problem is they're behaving less inconveniently to you.
Right.
But a lot of times that will show itself in maybe not until they're 18 or 20, and they have a complete mental breakdown from constantly being a fake person all the time.
Right.
And being so terrified to literally just do their own stims that aren't bothering anyone. The alternative is occupational therapy, helping people be able to accomplish the things that they want to accomplish. Do they want to be able to live independently and not let their dishes pile up for 3 weeks? Or do they're having trouble holding down a job, but they want to help with that? So occupational therapy or other types of therapy are often focused on, like Marissa was saying, helping them with the thing that they want to do. Yeah. And ABA is generally almost exclusively focused on having autistic people exhibit less problematic and annoying behavior to neurotypical people.
That's really obnoxious.
Yeah,
which is couched as fixing the problem because they are no longer disrupting the
Listen,
classroom.
you're weird. Whatever. I want you to be not weird.
Yeah.
Can you please make me more comfortable?
What's at least one trait that when you talk about things they're trying to make kids not do, like
stimming?
Probably stimming.
Okay.
Yes.
Like my son clears his throat. That's what he does.
Stimming, fidgeting, needing to move around, like Marissa was saying.
I kick my foot.
Info dumping.
Yeah, info dumping. So excited about all these things. You want to hear?
Forcing people to hug people, forcing people to shake their hands, forcing people to talk to people, forcing them to do silly, like, I never say the word please. I just can't do it. I don't know.
Introduce yourself. Go around the room and introduce yourself in an animal that you relate to. I would sit there and just get sick to my stomach and be like, can I go to the bathroom before the guy before me? Can I just be gone? Maybe they won't circle around. Maybe they won't notice me. That every time I start a new job in training class would just make me sick to my stomach.
Yeah, and if there's a problematic stim like my skin picking, I would love tools to do that less, right? I do not want to be picking my skin all the time. But ABA may be one way to possibly achieve that, but generally speaking, the entire principle behind it is about making autistic people behave less autistically instead of about helping autistic people have a happy and successful life that they want to have. And in general, there's a lot of parents of autistic kids in the world that mean really well, and I just really, really, really would like them to engage with the adult autistic community. Just read people or follow people. If you the hashtag actually autistic is, you'll find there's all sorts of people, because autistic people, generally speaking, love communicating on the internet.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people out there doing a lot of work on this subject. There's tons of blogs and Twitter accounts and Facebook accounts, and just listen to adult autistic people if you want to find out how to help your autistic child instead of listening to a gigantic portion of the healthcare field is based on ABA. And that's terrifying.
It is terrifying.
Yeah, I'll say two things really quick. One, so much of the autism mom TM is based around this benevolent condescension of, oh, we love you so much despite your tragic brokenness.
Yeah.
And then look how incredible I am because I put up with all of this. That really bothers me, where they're just like, they become this martyr because they're putting up with this child that has all of these giant issues. Dude, that's your kid.
And autism is not separable from the autistic person. So that's one other thing, is the autistic community generally prefers to be called autistic and not a person with autism.
See, I've heard the opposite of that.
That's
interesting.
The Autism Speaks.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
That person with autism is, and in general, a lot of the disability community is leaning towards away from the person first language, which is person with X, because there's an acknowledgement that it's part of your identity, and that trying to separate it from your identity is actually sort of ableist and belittling because it's saying you're a person who's afflicted.
It's like the
with
person
this thing.
who was tested positive for COVID.
Well, and
Right.
it didn't occur to me until I had been talking to somebody else who's autistic, having a private conversation, and they said autism it's not like a mental health issue. It's not like depression, where I can take meds for those horrible symptoms I have. And with autism, there's nothing you need to fix or change. It's just learning how to accept that person for who they are and the way they do things. And I had never thought about it that way before, in that it's not a mental illness. It's because there are so many mental illnesses that are really hard that you do want to work on, but this isn't one of them.
Yeah, and like, you can't separate autism from your kid. Your kid is autistic, and that is what makes them them, and you can't pull those two things apart.
Right.
The way that I can put it best is if you rephrase ABA as conversion therapy for autistic people, not only is that exactly what it is, but gay conversion therapy was founded out of the exact same school of thought in medicine that ABA was.
Good
So
God.
it's literally the same idea as conversion therapy.
Yeah, that's just so frustrating.
And it's so much like the left-handed stuff that we talked about, except
Yeah.
on a more complex level.
Yeah.
It's just you make your child not be your child exactly the way they are already.
Yeah, and then they come home and they just shut down instead of having outbursts. But that's more convenient to you, but that's not your child living a better life.
Right.
So it's I just wanted to throw that out there because I think that's a hard pill to swallow for some parents of autistic kids, but it's really, really important. And
Well, no, I'm glad you said it
Yeah.
because I think that's one of the things that, as a parent, I would not have known. I know because I've heard about it and I've talked to you about it, but I can see parents getting that diagnosis and then going, oh, what do I do now? And having a doctor send them somewhere, and you think you're doing what you're supposed to do, and everybody around you is encouraging you to do that, and you don't. So I'm glad it's something that autistic people are talking about and just making people more aware of, so that those of us with kids don't put them in harm's way inadvertently.
Or make them
because
feel
we're
like
trying
they're
to-
wrong for being
Right.
themselves.
Exactly, yeah.
there's a lot of pushback to that message in the world, and I think it's very clear who's correct, but there is a ton of soft pedal messaging about, we have rebranded this, but there's official certifications and they have behavior analyst in the title. Sometimes you have to dig a little deeper on things, and these institutions have a ton of money. It's a lot like chiropractic. It's covered by insurance. It's very deeply embedded in the healthcare system. They have a lot of money. It's not going away anytime soon. So there is a lot of ABA apologism out there, but I think if you do even an hour or two of reading around, it will become very obvious who's on the correct side.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Once again, it's like people who are transphobes but phrase it in a way of protecting women or protecting
Yeah. We're just
protecting
looking out
kids.
for the children. It's
Yeah.
okay.
It's
Who
the
will
exact
think of
same
the
argument.
children?
Have you thought about the children? I'm like, oh my God. How often?
Well, yeah, and they'll be like, well, they have less outbursts.
Times.
They have less outbursts, and outbursts are embarrassing for them. And it's like, right, but they're having less outbursts with
Find
you
out
in the training.
source of the outburst.
Right.
Why
Stop
are they
forcing
upset?
them to be in an overwhelming environment, and they'll also have fewer outbursts.
Well, thank you both so much for talking about this. It's just, like I said, it's something that it's constantly on my mind these days, and I think more people need better information about it. And I feel like I know so many people who are autistic, just in my Facebook world and my online world.
I think neurodiverse people tend to Velcro with each other a little bit, especially in the online world. Like, you just find the people that you vibe with, and that just happens to be, and I think it goes really well with ADHD and autism together, but in general, there's sort of like a little affinity going on that sorts itself out in cyberspace.
And I think that it probably it's easier to be disillusioned by religion.
Yes.
Like, you see through the bullshit faster.
Yeah.
I mean, it took me 34 years, but faster.
I think that there's definitely part of that. And the last thing I want to say, too, is when I hear, because, well, we're all on a podcast. I listen to podcasts all the time. And I hear stories about so many incredible people in history that I'm like, yep, autistic.
Yeah.
Marie Curie? Yep. Marie Curie? Yep.
I am not saying platitudes when I'm like, I think that autistic brains are so necessary and so important to humanity and such a valuable part of the human experience. And there's just nothing to be ashamed of about it. And there's nothing to be looked down upon because it's, I mean, there are
have a lot of gifts.
And don't change your kids for who they are.
Being able to see the world in a different way than everybody else.
Well, I'm sure you've heard this, Dell, where people are saying that autism caused vaccines. Have you heard that one?
I have. Yeah, because that's the thing.
Because of the scientific minds.
Particularly the way that special interests function and hyper-focus functions. I think so many of the great people in history were weirdos. And I mean that in a very positive way. And where would we be without all of us weirdos in the world?
We need the weirdos. I know. Weirdos are delightful.
And it just really took me a really long time to actually believe that.
Yeah. Oh, well, you are delightful, and so are you, Marissa. Marissa, what do you have for last words or last thoughts, whatever?
Pretty much, it's a lot of unpacking in the sense that kind of like how people have had to rethink gender, kind of like how people have had to rethink sexuality, rethinking the social defaults takes the people in the positions of privilege to do it and to not make it the person who is marginalized problem.
Right.
So when you're unlearning racism, you don't make it your black friend's problem. When you're unlearning gender, you don't make it your trans friend's problem.
Right.
It's the same thing with autism. There are different ways that people see the world. There are different ways that people's brains work, despite the fact that we've been taught that brains work one way and everything is done one way. And just like straightness was the default, just like whiteness was the default, just like Christianity was the default, neurotypical was the default for so long that people think that that's the only way it works. And that if you just input the right code, everybody will eventually conform. And unlearning that is a process. It's never done. But at the same time, if you just realize that some people see things differently and understand things differently, and there might be traditions that really mean a lot to you that are arbitrary and useless to us, and we don't mean that as a fucking insult.
Yeah.
Like, I don't celebrate Valentine's Day not because of some kind of social protest or to ruin your day. I just it doesn't compute for me that I should feel a way because a day says I should. That's my thing.
I should buy flowers just because it's the 14th.
Right. I'll buy flowers because I want to, not because a day
flowers on the
said
17th, and they're on sale.
Yeah. So just realize that brains work differently, and that's okay. And if you have autistic friends, ask what they need instead of assuming what they need based on what you've learned, because unless you've learned it directly from an autistic person, chances are it's shrouded in autism mom bullshit. So
and even then, it's that for that particular person, because
ask.
Everybody is super different.
Yeah, just
like what Marissa needs isn't what Dell needs. It's just super different.
We were talking about boundaries earlier and about how we get to choose the physical affection. Same thing. Let us tell you what we need, because if we tell you what we need and you let us have that or are supportive to that, chances are we're going to trust you a lot more. Like, it's just that basic.
Yeah.
So
a lot of like what you were saying, Marissa, about how it relates to other types of being different, just relaxing and not being threatened by people that are different than you. Oh, they don't want to turn their video on even though everyone else in the meeting has their video on. Okay, not a crisis. You don't have to force conformity on people. Yeah. And some people just get so threatened and upset by people being different than them. And it's another aspect of that.
Yeah, which is just, it's unfortunate. And I, not to harp on it too much, but yeah, that's what I see happening in schools a lot. You'd think we'd be getting better at it,
Right.
but there's still a whole lot of, well, let's look at this standardized test. And is your child in the yellow zone or the green zone or the red zone? And here's why. And just,
If you ever
just
find
let my
yourself
kid be
starting
weird.
to ask a question that starts with, why can't you just?
Yeah.
Stop.
Yes.
Yeah. That makes total sense, yeah. I've thought so many times just in my head about teachers, like, why can't you just let them do the thing that you think is weird? Who cares? Like, why is it? I remember my youngest used to, when he was younger, he could not sit at the table. He just hated it. He had to go sit somewhere else. He didn't like sitting at the table. He would stay there for 2 seconds and leave. And I just didn't give a shit because
Right.
life is busy and I was tired and I don't fucking care where he sits as long as he eats. But it would drive my mom nuts because she was just like, you're supposed to teach your kids to sit down and eat at the table.
They
And I'd
have
be
to
like,
follow
but
the
why
arbitrary
though?
rule.
My
But
son
why?
used to
Like,
run around the
he's still
table. He
eating.
would just run
Yeah.
around the table the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
And my
Yeah.
mom used to freak out. She was like, why doesn't he sit down? Like, because he doesn't want to. Like, who
Yeah.
cares?
Who,
Is he
who's
eating? Yes.
Is he hurting
fine? Yes.
Yeah, he would sit, we went to a picnic and he decided to go sit on like the grassy area to eat his food. And my mom's like, why isn't he at the picnic table? Well, because he likes the grassy area. So
Fine.
who gives a shit? Like,
Well,
just,
it's been about an hour and a half.
yeah, we
Sorry.
gotta go. So yeah, no,
Dell,
that's what happens when you get
directly
full
blaming
people,
you.
So yeah. So Dell, tell everybody about your podcast. Plug the things you're
Where
doing.
can we find
and
you?
Where can we find
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, so I'm podcasting on Skeptarchy. We're about every 2 weeks. There's a couple other co-hosts on that. That's the main thing. I have my evidence-based eating, which I did release a few episodes, and I do still want to do it. I just have 2 whole jobs and a lot of tiredness in my
Mhm.
life.
I get
Totally
it.
understand that.
Yeah, so Skeptarchy is the one that I'm regularly doing right now. I think we'll be having an episode released very soon here because we recorded it a little while ago. Yeah.
All right, Marissa.
So I do more podcast editing and producing anymore than I do actually doing my own podcast, which is fine. I get a lot of enjoyment out of the editing and producing process and helping other shows get started. We still do The Sister Getting Out of Hand. We have a show called But I Heard About It that Amy's actually guesting on the next episode.
Nice.
Yep.
And I do this show about a specific special interest of mine that
Might it be a
Amy's-
TV show?
yeah, and you might hang out with me there. So
Maybe sometimes.
if you want an extended 2-year info dump about Fargo, check out OK Then, because that's literally
Yeah.
what it is.
Fargo the TV show, not the city, because nobody cares about Fargo the city. So,
No, not even the people in Fargo.
And I liked the
They
movie,
don't.
but apparently that's wrong.
oh, the movie's terrible. Got to watch the show. Did you
Okay.
not watch the show yet, Amy?
I have not.
Oh, for fuck's sake! Just
I
get
have-
on and watch the
I
show.
also
Come
have
on.
2
no,
jobs like
no,
that.
no, no, no.
Okay.
I don't want to hear
Okay.
excuses. Watch Fargo. Anyway, thank you both so much for being here.
Yes,
we
you
really
guys are
appreciate
amazing.
it.
Love
Would
you
love
both.
to have you back to talk more about it at some point. And
Anytime.
thanks everybody for listening, and we will see you next time. Bye.
That's the noodle soup rag.
Hey everyone, it is that time again to thank our patrons. If you would like to become a patron, please join us on patreon.com/secularsoup. You can throw all your money at us or just a little bit of your money. We'll take both. Both are, or I was going to say neither, but not neither. We want a little bit of your money at least. If you can't afford to give us any of your money, we totally get it because we are broke as fuck as well. But if you can't do that, if you could just leave us a review on iTunes maybe, or Facebook, or wherever you can review stuff, that really, really helps us out. So, however, if you are of the money-giving persuasion, we would love to have you sign up at one of our many wonderful levels. If you sign up at the $6.66 a month or more level, which is called our Devil's Chili level, then you will get a shout out on every single episode, which is what I am here to do right now. So, at our Devil's Chili level, we have Yesh, Shmishtina, Paul, Nuggin, Natalie, Maddie, Lois, Life in the Left Lane Podcast, Freethinker215, and Andy. And our next level up is called Lobster Bisque. That is $10 a month, and you get a personalized soup bowl if you sign up at the Lobster Bisque level. It will take me forever to make the bowl. I can't lie to people about that. It's gonna take goddamn forever because I'm busy as fuck. So, but eventually you'll get a really cool bowl in the mail with your name on it and with the words Secular Soup and some other fun things. So $10 a month will get you that. Our $10 a month patrons currently are Wendy, Verlaine, our 18th favorite Rich. I'm being real generous these days. 18th favorite Rich. Renee, Aaron, and a noble spirit embiggens the smallest man. A perfectly cromulent statement. Okay, let's hope I said all that right. I don't know. I mean, I went to college, but those are really big words, so. At the $20 a month level, that is our top level, our premier blueberry dessert soup level, $20 a month or more, which, as I tell you every week, I can't believe anybody is at that level because it seems obnoxious to give a podcast that much money. But we are here for it. We appreciate it. We buy a lot of nail polish with it, and we keep Amy in whiskey, and that's what's really important here. So our $20 patrons, as always, we have Randall. Perfectly okay, Randall. We love you, Randall. Ashley, very favorite patron. I don't think anybody could ever possibly top Ashley for favorite patron. I don't think it's going to happen. We've also got Learning with TFIL is my favorite class this semester. As I discussed last week, I don't know what TFIL means, but I am glad that Nathan is enjoying it in college, and I'm sure eventually I'll figure out what it is. I suppose I could Google it, but I'm tired and old and lazy, so I'm not going to do that. So thank you, Nathan, and our top patron, once again, Just John from now on. Thank you so much, John. We really do appreciate your money. I'm sure I say that every time, but it's true. We love the money. We might actually be able to get some more decent equipment. Maybe one of these days get Amy a decent computer that doesn't stop recording halfway through an episode. So that would be awesome. Thank you all so much for giving us your money. We appreciate it more than you can possibly imagine. And please think about signing up. Patreon.com/secularsoup. See you next time.
Thanks to all of you motherfuckers who put up with the Amy's droning on week after week. If you enjoy their delightful bitchcraft, please follow them on all of the social medias and send them all of your money on Patreon or PayPal. You can find them on these platforms by using the Google machine. It's not hard. If you want to bitch with other fans about the show, join the Secret Soup Talk Facebook group. If you want to tell Amy and Amy to fuck off personally, you can send an email to secularsouppodcast@gmail.com, although it may go unanswered. Please rate and review the show on iTunes, Facebook, and wherever else you can review things like this. It will help spread the soup gospel far and wide. And hey, text someone right now. Tell your friends. As always, we'll leave you with the vocal stylings of Mr. Eli Bosnick.
Secular soup creed. Soup is the ultimate virtue. It's delicious, nutritious, patriarchy smashing, racism fighting, warm and fuzzy, human affirming, fun having, anti-theist, glitter throwing, tummy satisfying, pair of new shoes fulfilling, diversity seeking, happiness. Minestrone, beef and barley, chicken broth and split pea, gazpacho, tomato, clam chowder and potato, chicken noodle, beef noodle, egg drop and ramen cup, miso, gumbo, leek and pho. Grab a bowl and taste the magic. Slurp even this.
So yeah, we're just gonna wing it like we normally do. Ask basic questions about kind of almost a primer maybe on autism and just how you realized that you were, or how you were diagnosed, or if you were, all just everything about all the things. Sure. We'll talk about all the things. So
sounds good to me.
So I will count backwards to from 5, and then everybody hit record at the same time, and that'll just hopefully make it easier to line up the audio. So
Exactly.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Mine is like a second ahead.
How dare you?
I know, because I was like
damn it.
hovering over the record button and it like hit it.
Mother.
God, when we send this to the editor, she's going to be so pissed.
I know.
She's not going to
Have
know
my
how
hide.
going to have to cut a whole half a second out, and it's just going to be a real fucking pain in the ass. Thanks
And
a lot,
I warned her
Amy.
ahead of time so she knew it was coming.
Right.
Oh my
Thanks
God.
a lot. Anyway.
Yeah, it's not like I edited 14 whole podcasts last
Yeah.
week. Like,
Oh my gosh. 14.
That's
You're
amazing.
doing way too many podcasts. That's just too much.
no, I'm not.
Mercy,
I'm
start a show.
actually making money doing it now. So
See, now we have good outtake for the end. So this will be fantastic. Somebody told me they liked my kind of behind the scenes outtakes at the end. So, yeah. Anyway, okay.